God began to create the heavens and the earth. The earth was without shape or form. It was dark over the deep sea, and God's wind swept over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and so light appeared. God saw how good the light was. God separated the light from the darkness. God named the light day and the darkness night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate the waters from each other." God made the dome and separated the waters under the dome from the waters above the dome. And it happened in that way. God named the dome sky. There was evening and there was morning, the second day. God said, "Let the waters under the sky come together in one place so that dry land can appear." And that's what happened. God named the dry land earth, and he named the gathered waters seas. God saw how good it was. God said, "Let the earth grow plant life, plants yielding seeds and fruit trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind throughout the earth." And that's what happened. The earth produced plant life, plants yielding seeds, each according to its kind, and trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind. God saw how good it was. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Don't let it confuse you. I am not a carpenter, so the sawdust, I think, was an autocorrect fix as I was looking for stardust. But, being followers of a carpenter, we could go with that too. I know it's something of a cliche in our tradition when we come to the Sunday where we celebrate the baptism of Jesus Christ to remember our own baptisms. So this morning instead, I'm going to ask you to reimagine your baptism. And in part of that, I hope you'll bear with me as I share with you some of my own story of my remembering and reimagining. And in order to do that, I have asked Jeremy to cue up a video that I'd like to share.
We are part of this universe. We are part of this universe. We are in this universe. The universe itself exists. We are part of this universe. We are in this universe. The universe is in us. Yes, the universe is in us. Every atom in your body is what's learned and focused. You are part of us. You are part of us. What's learned and
We're getting there. Sometimes I would go out and sit almost like this when it was warm enough, when the air hadn't already cooled and the dew had fallen in the early evening. I'd go sit behind the grain bins on my farm in the shadow side because they provided the perfect kind of lee area, safe from the light, not the wind, because they would block out the light from the big street lamp that we had over our drive there on the farm. It would cut out the light pollution coming from Centralia. Little though it was, it would interfere with your ability to view the night sky. And so when the ground wasn't too damp, I would sit back behind the grain bin and I would just look. I learned my first constellations by picking them out of books and then searching the sky. My dad had taught me how to find true north, following the big and the little dippers to find your way to the North Star, and said if you can see a clear sky, you can always figure out your direction at night. And this is one of the first things I remember him teaching me. And so then I began to look and learn and began to find the other constellations that danced around the dippers. And these experiences became something I didn't understand at the time, that the language I have for it now I would call holy. For I would look into the distance, millions upon millions of miles, and at the same time, not even realizing yet, thousands of years backward in time and into the past, and have this great moment of feeling simultaneously so small and insignificant, and yet feeling a part of something so great and so wonderful and so inspiring and mysterious and incomprehensible. And here I was. I didn't have the language of stardust yet. I came by that later when I first encountered Carl Sagan's original Cosmos videos, and they became another holy experience for me. What he did with the world of science and brought the awe and the mystery and the wonder into it. A humility into it of going, we have learned so much, and yet we look out into that distance and there is so much we still don't know. It took on a ring of faith for me, and it began to inform who I am. So yes, you have a minister who has a science and math background. This is what you're going to get, right? But there was something holy and mysterious and amazing, and there still is. I so desperately missed it while living in Chicago because I couldn't see any of it. And then I moved out here where you can see it when it's not cloudy. But on occasion, you can still see it. And for me, there's something divine about looking millions of miles into the distance and thousands of miles into the past, having distant stars winking at us, knowing they may not even be there anymore. This was 10,000 years ago. It's an awe-inspiring experience for me. And to become someone who understands himself as having a place in this cosmos, this highly creative yet incredibly destructive order in which we are made up of elements that could only be formed in the midst of superconductive and overheated cores of stars, and that these elements would only be available to create us when these stars exploded violently and cast their innards out into the depths and the emptiness around them. I feel simultaneously and simultaneously infinite, all at the same time. I was drawn to the story of creation this morning because it reminds me so much of the stories of creation I've come to know through my encounters with astronomy and science. The way stars gather up helium, begin to burn, ignite, and then slowly over time build heavier and heavier metals until they come to the point where they cannot sustain themselves and explode. And the process begins all over again. There's something fascinating about this idea of renewal coming out of the life, the birth, the life, the death, and then the new birth of stars. And I think of our creation story and this story of waters. And I think of our baptism stories and how they are stories of waters, and I'm drawn to them in much the same way. In those first words at the beginning of Genesis, we're given this image of a formless void, and then there are waters. And the Spirit of God hovers above the waters. I can almost see and feel those first vibrations of creation as the Spirit exhales that breath, that pneuma of new life. And the waves began to ripple out. And the light and the darkness encompassed within them begins to separate apart. And we develop night and day. And then that dome, which separates the waters which are below from the waters up above. The oceans that would form on our earth and the rains that would fall down from the skies. And then the hands of the Spirit separating those waters below the dome and the land beginning to emerge. Creation is born. Creation is begun. It's a story we see played out time and again. Sea waters rise and land sinks beneath as volcanoes form up from the bottoms of the ocean and build themselves up to the point where they rise again and emerge from the waters. A new day, a new place of life. And I think of how we learn through our seminary training and our histories that these deep waters for the ancient Hebrews, the people who told these stories and recorded them so that we might tell them today, these deep waters were places of great power and great fear. We know that the Israelites were fishers, but they were not seafarers like their Phoenician neighbors to the north, who built great ships and mastered the entire Mediterranean, became the Carthaginians, whom the Romans later so hated. They were not afraid of deep waters, but the people of Israel had a standoffish and distant relationship. For in those waters, we see in these early creation myths the chaos, the uncertainty, the unknowable. A place in need of taming, and a divine hand was the only one that could draw forth order from the chaos. We see it in the story of Jonah, who is so desperate to flee God that he will risk going out over the deep waters. And as his crew decides he is the curse, is about to be thrown into the deep waters, only to be rescued by God sending the whale to draw him up out of the chaos. Tell me that Jonah being thrown into the water and then brought back up by God's whale was not a story of baptism. For he went into the chaos, into the void where order is no more, and allowed God to draw him up, and in a way he became renewed and recreated for the mission that God had called him to, that he was adamantly and defiantly refusing to do by going out into the sea. Suddenly now brought back to dry land, he was willing to go forth and follow God anew. If that's not a story that some of us can get behind, I don't know what is. Certainly mine. But the idea that baptism isn't just about washing away sins the way John the Baptist was hoping to do. That Israel might be saved if we can just ritually cleanse the entire nation. Perhaps the Romans will go away. I can't help but think there's something about entering into the chaos and allowing God to pull us back out again, to create a new being of each of us, a new life. Baptism isn't just a remission of sins. It is a remission of the old so that we might be renewed into that which God is calling us to be. I found that story by reimagining baptism in Genesis 1 through the eyes of astronomy and Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, some of my favorite theologians. Certainly that one will get me burned at somebody's stake for saying that. I see these images of being drawn forth and created new again, and I think baptism, that is an amazing opportunity. Not some one-time shot at having our sins forgiven, but an opportunity to be made over, and perhaps more closely attuned with the image of our God. It's hard for me to talk spirituality. I find in our history disciples have never been great at it. And I find that in my training, seminary, I didn't get a whole lot of it. A lot more of this than there was of this. But there's something powerful about engaging the mystery of the deepness and the depth of the universe. There's something powerful about staring into the depths of deep waters and wondering at the chaos beneath it that we cannot fathom or know. And there's something powerful about trusting that in all of this, the unknowing, the uncertainty, even the danger of existing and going into the depths of the waters, that God is calling us out and drawing us out and inviting us to be made new, and in our own incomplete human ways to be made whole. There's something amazing about the thought that something as infinite and expansive as God, something so great that it can contain the depths of this universe into which I like to go out at night and stare, would care about something so insignificant as the speck of dust on the grand scheme of the cosmic map that I surely must be. I find myself in awe, and I find myself feeling unbelievably and amazingly loved. And it is hard for me not to respond in kind with love. I pray for all of us that experience. However it may come, whatever it may be, I don't think I could set you all down in front of Cosmos and expect you to suddenly love God like I did. But I pray that we will all find those connections to the divine, those ways to not only remember but reimagine our baptisms, to embrace the mystery of salvation, the chaos of all that is beyond, the unknowingness of knowing what little we do of God, and allow ourselves to be loved, and see if we do not find ourselves responding in turn and love ourselves. God has given so many amazing gifts. My prayer is that we all find the ways to know and embrace and unpack the ones that God has chosen for us. May we enter into the waters and let God draw us forth again. In the name of Jesus, our Christ.